and speaking very softly and sweetly. I was totally impressed. It was my desire to see him personally. Then it was 1990, I think. He came and he gave, I remember, he gave 3,000 rupees to my Gurudeva's hand and explained, this is the service of your temple at Kalna. The Guru Maharaj took the money and touched on his head and kept in his bag. Then a long discussion. Whatever questions if his problem to answer, he make a list in the diary and he asked to my Gurudev, and Gurudev one by one he gave answer. Almost 45 minutes. Then he requested, Maharaj, if I arrange your lunch prasadam from one of the devotee, named Chaitanya Das and Malini Devi. Looks like Chaitanya Das and Malini Devi, they are very dedicated towards Maharaj. Means towards Bhakti Charu Swami. Very, they are really prepared such a nice lunch offering for my Gurudev. Not every day, but in a week, maybe 2-3 days. And whatever leftover of my Guru Maharaj's plate, it was happily I used to take it. And I remember Charu Maharaj's blessings. We are getting such a nice, healthy and nutritious prasadam. That is one part. But Srila Bhakti Charu Swami, I have seen also. In Mayapur, once he used to give class on Jaiva Dharma on the top of the conch building, I think. Not Lotus building, conch building. Very nice room. He used to stay, I don't know, very glorious room. I went there and I met with him. I was not sannyasi, I was brahmachari. Then one devotee said, Maharaj will give class on the top rooftop after 5 minutes. Then I was there. I was waiting for Maharaj. And he gave very nice, attractive for all neophyte people, such type of class. And inspire people to chant 64 rounds. Why? Why I'm telling you so? Because that day he says, who will chant 64 rounds on the Ekadashi day, next day he will honor prasadam with me. In the other day, he will honor prasadam with me. In that way, even he called Radha Prabhu. What prasadam he will arrange. I don't know, Radha Prabhu maybe kitchen in charge. I remember everything that day. So I feel blessed and returned to our temple, Gopinath Gaurimat, Mayapur. It was in Mayapur. My Gurudev was there. Often my Gurudev used to come and stay in Mayapur, Gopinath Gaurimat. Therefore I was there. So anyway, then I saw Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj came to see my Gurudev at Mayapur temple. Same. He came just around 10:30. Yes, 10:30. And he just asking my Gurudev. He came with one of his Western devotee, and Western devotee taking picture while he asking question to my Gurudev, and Gurudev answering all the questions, all his queries, and that time he was taking picture. My Gurudev also liked him so much. Why? Because his nature was very soft and sweet. Also, I have seen side by side his nature. He's like a Vajradupi Kotorani, Mriduni Kushumadupi. Means what is not favorable for devotion, he was like a thunderbolt against that. What is favorable for devotion, he becomes so soft. I have seen that part. So therefore, I liked Maharaj. Even whenever I met with him, always asking me, how is Srila Puri Goswami Maharaj? Even I saw he sent his disciple to meet with my Gurudev, Chaitanya Das Prabhu, his wife Malini Devi, Shuval Shakha Prabhu, his wife, as well as so many other names I don't know, that they used to come and very soft manner. I feel like his disciple nature like a replica of Bhakti Charu Swami. He was such a nice manner. He was teaching them. So Srila Maharaj is like a one great preacher. Preacher means spiritual preacher by example in our Gaudiya Sampradaya, or as well as Ishkan Sampradaya. So I feel proud of Srila Maharaj. You know, I remember my spiritual master physically passed away. After that, we arranged his disappearance festival. And I humbly request Srila Maharaj, Srila Jayapataka Maharaj, and other devotees from ISKCON. Then I saw Srila Maharaj came. Also Jayapataka Maharaj came to attend that disappearance function and give very nice discourses. Both Jayapataka Maharaj and Bhakti Charu Maharaj, both they give very nice discourses. After the discourses, they honor prasadam, because that time they followed Bhishma Panchak. So they are taking only Bhishma Panchak prasadam. After that, everybody left except Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He came to my room and sit on a chair, and then I felt Lord is fulfilling my desire. I was thinking to meet with Srila Maharaj personally. Now Lord arrange very closely I am meeting with him. And he mercifully allow me to be with him in my room, not in his room. In my room in Mayapur. So he was sitting on the chair and he was asking me that, Maharaj, that time I was sannyasi. So he addressed me like, Maharaj, when you go for preaching purpose, any places, wherever is ISKCON center, please let me know. I will arrange to host you in our temple. I will arrange your reception, everything. Then after a few months, I went to Mumbai. Means I'm coming back from South Africa, Johannesburg to Mumbai airport. Then I wrote Maharaj, I will be there in Mumbai. My email. Then when I reached Mumbai, it was 12 night. Then I saw no one there to come and pick up me. Then I was sitting in the waiting hall. Then I saw two persons came and searching me. And then as soon as they saw this yellow rope, then they came to me, "Are you Bodhayana Maharaj? Our Gurudev sent us to pick you up and host you to our Juhu temple in each quarter." They have become so happy. Srila Maharaj was not there. Really, they arranged my accommodation, my prasadam, as good as Maharaj's arrangement in each quarter. Two sevak he arranged for me. And then he called me and he said, "I'm not able to physically there, but they will look after you as like me." I feel like that. Then I went to Los Angeles. I wrote him, "Maharaj, I am in Los Angeles. Here Suhas Prabhu looks like he has antagonistic mood against Gaudiya Math. But if you have any problem, don't do anything in my favor. But you have no problem, please arrange just to visit the temple." Then after few hours, he called me back. He was in North Carolina, in USA, and I was in Los Angeles. Then he called me and said, "Maharaj, you go there, no problem." Then I really surprised that Suhas Prabhu, usually he don't like us, but that day, because of Maharaj, he just happily received me and personally showed me all the places where Bhaktivedanta Swami used to stay, where is all the diorama, museum. He showed me everything. And then he approached me for prasadam, but I was not ready to take prasadam over there because I already invited. So I went there. Anyway, that I remember now, how Maharaj sweetly invited me. My spiritual master not physically present in this material world anymore. But Bhakti Charu Maharaja's mercy, generosity, I was getting like this, such a manner looks like he treat me as my Gurudev. How he treat my Gurudev, he treating me as my Gurudev. I am his senior, I am his junior, I am not senior. But still, his nature such a soft, I don't know how. I was thinking I'm not able to deserve such type of respect from Maharaj, but he gave me such a respect. So many incidents I just remember, but I don't have time because 20 minutes is my time limit. So therefore, I just mention one thing. Last year, 2020, around middle of April, I wrote a letter to Maharaj that please write a homage for my Gurudevas, His Divine Grace Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Thakur, because I want to publish his biography and I want to write your homage in that biography. After 2-3 days, he replied, "Maharaj, I am in Ujjaini. I am a little busy, but I will write you." So, around this end of May, 27th of May, like that, he sent me his homage, very nice homage. very little touching my heart. That homage I already printed to my Gurudeva's biography. And then he also wrote, I am going to America. When I come back, I want to meet with you personally. Then I say, Maharaj, okay. Then I ask, Maharaj, this pandemic, how you go? Then he said, no problem. I have some special arrangement. I'll go there. When I come back, I will meet you personally. We can make a plan about our future preaching program. Then I said, okay. Then all of a sudden, around I think first week of July, 4th or 5th July, I got a news, heart-breaking news. Maharaj, no more with us. He left his body. And then I was thinking, still I am thinking, when Maharaj will come down to me. When Maharaj will come down to me and talk about his preaching plan. So what to do? I never thought in my mind that Maharaj will pass away such quick manner. It seems like he put us in a separation. And I feel Maharaj was treasure of entire Gaudiya Vaishnava community. Because he was by born, he's Bengali. He's Bengali very sweet. His language very sweet. As well as I saw also his English, very nice. When he speak in English, he never made mistake. Any grammatical mistake was not there. Also have seen several singing class. Means once I was in South Africa, I saw Maharaj was there in Durban. Durban temple, he was there. I was there also, not in the temple, outside of the temple, on devotee house. Then I saw Maharaj asking the devotees, should I speak or should I sing? Everybody is happily say, sing. Then Maharaj started to sing. Such a nice, melodious singing. I think in our community, no one can sing like this way. So I feel indebted to Srila Maharaj, His Divine Grace, Bhakti Charu Swami, what he gave us for expanding the non-sectarian loving mission of Lord Chaitanya. We are not able to life. So therefore, he is great for my life. He is great treasure for our sampradaya. Please accept my humble obeisance, and I offer in mind the flower from my heart to your lotus feet. Please accept that flower tribute and bless me to carry the Lord Chaitanya's mission with purity rest of my life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, thank you very much, Maharaj, for sharing your wonderful memories with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. He mentioned that how Maharaj was so kind of you. He mentioned that how he regularly used to visit His Holiness, His Divine Grace Bhakti Pramod Swami Maharaj, and used to ask many questions. And you heard Guru Maharaj used to like him very much. He mentioned that how he is a perfect example in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara and in ISKCON Parampara. He mentioned that how he used to make all the arrangements whenever, whether it's Mumbai, whether it's Los Angeles, South Africa, wherever, Maharaj was so kind upon you. He mentioned that how he is a jewel in Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara. And at last he mentioned that how the separation is just to intensify our loving relationship with him. So thank you very much, Maharaj, for sharing your wonderful memories with Maharaj. So now we will be hearing from His Grace Sankarshan Das Adhikari Prabhu. I will give a brief introduction about Prabhu. Sankarshan Das Adhikari Prabhu, he appeared in St. Louis in November 1947, 10th day of auspicious Kartik month, and he first met Srila Prabhupada in 1971 and was initiated by Srila Prabhupada the same year on 12th August. Srila Prabhupada was very much pleased with Prabhu's sincerity and enthusiasm for spreading Krishna consciousness. In year 2000, he was appointed as initiating spiritual master by GBC. He is well known for internet-based training programs, the ultimate self-realization course that he gives, and has reached about 12,000 subscribers from 100 different countries who receive a daily inspirational message and personal answer to their questions regarding how to become perfect in Krishna consciousness. So we will be hearing from Sankarshan Das Adhikari Prabhu about his memories with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All glories to His Divine Grace, Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. I had very little association with Maharaj, but what I had was very, very powerful. I was a young brahmachari way back in the 80s. I had a one-man preaching center in Norman, Oklahoma. It wasn't easy to be all alone, just by myself, trying to preach with no other devotees association. But there was one bhajan that really gave me strength by Narottam. And one verse was, Ha ha svarup-sanatana Rupa Raghunath Bhatta Jugashi Jiva Prabhu Lokanath. So I was wondering, what is this Bhatta Yuga? Why Yuga? You see? Yuga means Kala Yuga. I was thinking Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwarpa Yuga. What does Yuga have to do with all these different personalities? So there was a nice program. There was, at that time, we had a farm in Oklahoma. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there, and Bhakti Charu Swami was there. So I asked him, actually it's a Bengali song, so he was very qualified to answer. He said, oh, Bhatta Yuga means, just like Jugala, pair or conjugal. The pair of Bhattas, Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta. So by his grace, I knew the meaning of that song. So many years went by. I didn't have any more association, but I always remembered how wonderful it was to get that answer from Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Now, just recently, I've had some association with him by email. I'm very disturbed by very different things at ISKCON that I see as deviations. The beards. I wrote him about the beards. He also agreed with me about the beards. And another one, this, what they call the broader definition of an illicit sex. Within marriage, well, as long as it's okay, as long as you don't use birth control, and as long as you don't abort the baby, and any kids come, you go ahead and raise them in Krishna consciousness. You see, this is an idea going around ISKCON. So you don't have to strictly follow, the once in a month rule after 50 rounds of japa. It's not really required. It's an option. really disturbs me a lot, because actually Prabhupada explains in his Bhagavatam purport that by passing semen, the more you pass semen, you become subject to quick death. The more you can withhold your semen, you expand your life. You live longer. So this idea of, very much disturbs me. This new idea is coming into ISKCON. So Bhakti Charu Swami totally agreed with me, and I really appreciated that. So it was certainly a great shock for me when he departed, but he's still here with us, that great personality. Just by remembering him, you see, we have his blessings, we have his Sangha, and by that Sangha we can achieve all success in life. Thank you very much for hearing this brief message. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaja ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, His Grace Sankarshan Adhikari Prabhu. So we will be hearing next from His Grace Sesa Prabhu. I will give a brief introduction about him. His Grace Sesa Prabhu's spiritual evolution led him from a career as an athlete and officer at West Point Military Academy to a brahmachari in Srila Prabhupada's Sankirtan Army. In 1973, he served as a BBT library book distributor and later as president of the Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. ISKCON Temple. After marrying, he earned a degree in law and served as a trustee for the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. His fellow GBC members regard him as an exemplary householder and a fair-minded, hard-working advocate of conciliation and cooperation. Sesa Prabhu's classes are always appreciated as thoughtful, heartfelt devotional expression of his many realization in Srila Prabhupada's service. So we will hear memories of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj, Sesa Prabhu.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nite Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Srinivare Paschatya Desatare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Charu Swami Nite Namane. Hare Krishna. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to glorify His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami on this first Tirobhav Mahotsava. Actually, I'm recording this video on July 4th, which is the day he passed away from this world. I decided to record it today because I have many emotions to start in connection with this day, and I thought them best to express them to you now. My last contact with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami was just days before he went into the hospital in Orlando. He had come to Orlando in what I consider to be very characteristic of his service, and that was his spontaneity. He wanted to preach. He had innovative ideas about preaching in Orlando, which he shared with me as I serve as the GBC for Orlando. Unfortunately, things turned the way they did, but they didn't, and they don't wipe from my memory spontaneous, loving service that was characteristic of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. I recall in one incident when we were in Seattle together, where we served as co-GBCs along with Ramai Swami. It was our first visit to Seattle, and so the temple authorities were taking us on a tour of the building, and most notably a community hall that they had just added to their campus. So we passed through the kitchen, and the offering was being made And Bhakti Charu Swami looked carefully at what was being prepared and spontaneously began to give instructions on cooking, how to cook the offering nicely for the Lord. Somehow or another, the conversation turned to cooking classes, and Bhakti Charu Maharaj volunteered to give cooking classes the very next day in the congregational hall the temple had just opened. And so for 2 or 3 days, he spontaneously gave cooking classes to all the devotees in the community. Something that started simply as what could be seen as an official tour of the new facilities turned into a spontaneous opportunity for Bhakti Charu Maharaj to instruct the devotees in how to serve Krishna nicely. That's the kind of spontaneity that I remember him for, and always will remember him for. I'd just like to end with that small episode in the spontaneous career, devotional service career of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Shri Prabhu, for sharing such wonderful memories with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. You mentioned about his spontaneous nature of services for pleasing Srila Prabhupada, and you mentioned this Shetalistic incident where he was on some official tour, but that official tour turned into 2-3 days cooking classes. So thank you very much, Prabhu, for sharing. Next, we will be hearing from His Holiness Guru Prasad Swami Maharaj. A brief introduction of Maharaj. Guru Prasad Swami Maharaj was born in USA and studied nuclear physics at Purdue University. After becoming disenchanted with science, he transferred to University of Texas, where he made contact with the Hare Krishna movement, but it was later during his military service in Panama when this encounter with ISKCON changed his life drastically. Upon concluding his military service, Guru Prasad Maharaj joined a pioneering group of Krishna devotees in Central America, stationed in San Jose, Costa Rica. He attended the 1976 Mayapur Vrindavan festival and was initiated by Srila Prabhupada there. He received sannyas initiation in 1982. Guru Prasad Swami's early contribution in ISKCON, Costa Rica, centered on administrative services and distributing BBT publications, beginning in 1975 in US and from 1976 to 78 in Central America. He became the temple president in Costa Rica temple in 1978 and then began traveling around Latin America, opening new temples, establishing worship centers, and collaborating in diverse administrative services. In 87, he became a member of GBC with zonal assignments in the Tucson area of Arizona and Mexico. He is a co-zonal secretary for El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, Belize, Costa Rica, Colombia, Trinidad, Tobago, and Venezuela. So we will hear His Holiness Guru Prasad Swami Maharaj, his memories with Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. So I thank you for this opportunity to speak something about my dear God brother and such a wonderful servant of Srila Prabhupada. I first met Bhakti Charu Maharaj, I think it was, I'm not sure if I met him in 76. I'm not sure. I think I did because I was staying outside near Prabhupada's room and he was in Srila Prabhupada's room. I knew who he was, but I may not have had the opportunity. But shortly after that, on my next trip to India in 78, just after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, especially in those days, it wasn't so easy just to get to Mayapur from the airport. So almost everyone would go stay in Calcutta. So I went to Calcutta Temple, and there I met Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and he said, "Why don't you come and stay with me?" At that time, I was just a simple brahmachari, Sankarshan devotee, recently put in charge of the Panama Temple, which I started. And but Maharaj, he very kindly invited me. I stayed with him, and for several years, every time I came to India, he would invite me. He would personally cook. You know, he was so busy. He was busy with his translations, even following the pattern of Srila Prabhupada of getting up very early in the morning. I used to think I would get up very early, in the sense that I would get up at 2:30, but I would get up at 2:30, quarter till 3, and he was already working, translating. But he would take the time to make sure that every one of my needs, I didn't have many needs as a brahmachari, but whatever I needed, making sure I had prasadam, making sure that whatever I needed to do in the 3 or 4 days that I was with him, he would arrange for it. And so it was such a wonderful devotee. I immediately thought, such a wonderful devotee. He was so intimately related to Srila Prabhupada, and yet he's so humble. He's so accommodating. And of course, then that was for a few years. Then Maharaj's services evolved. He had more responsibilities. I also did in 1982. I became the regional secretary of Mexico. I took sannyas, and every time I would come to India, Maharaj would invite me. So many times he would invite me to stay in a room. He would arrange a room for me, and then when he had his own facility, he would invite me if I didn't have a place to stay. It was amazing, and the experience of being on the GBC body with him was amazing. I never saw anyone serve the GBC body like Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He was always inviting all the devotees, always glorifying the GBC. In other words, whatever Srila Prabhupada established, I saw very clearly that Bhakti Charu Maharaj was pushing that forward. And I could see always talking about Srila Prabhupada, although he had so many personal qualifications, so much so that Srila Prabhupada singled him out, giving him first and second initiation together and sannyas shortly thereafter. It was obvious that Srila Prabhupada saw something in Bhakti Charu Maharaj that he didn't see in others. And of course, throughout the years, I invited him many times to come to my zone. He had no reason to come to my zone. He had so many responsibilities, but he came and visited Mexico. And I'll always remember that at that particular time, we had just received a deity from our previous farm project, deity of Prabhupada. And so I had put Prabhupada on a table, but that table was probably about 2 inches lower than the seat that I used. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj, the way he did it, the way he mentioned to me, how could I be sitting higher than Prabhupada, was so gentle. He just pointed to Prabhupada and he smiled. And I thought, well, yeah, let us smile at Prabhupada. And then he said in a humble, laughing way, always concerned about the way a devotee felt, that yes, Prabhupada should be higher. So immediately, of course, I put the deity higher up and realized what consciousness he had. And I could understand, especially at that time and on so many other occasions, how Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj was elected by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada could see a very special quality, which I would like to make the main focus of this particular remembrance, in the sense that I see so many parallels in the way that Srila Prabhupada carried out his devotional service and the way that Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj followed him very, very closely and very dearly, and to, not putting aside all modern considerations. Sometimes we allow our intelligence to overpower the exclusive and continuous faith in every instruction that Srila Prabhupada had. But I never saw Bhakti Charu Maharaj deviate. Srila Prabhupada got his 2 initiations at the same time, and so did Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Otherwise, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur saw something special in Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada saw something very special in Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Then, the most amazing thing was that Srila Prabhupada never declared himself to be anything other than a servant of his spiritual master. And again and again and again, whenever he was asked, about his scholarship, about anything, Prabhupada would always say, "It is all due to my Guru Maharaj." And this is something Srila Prabhupada captured, the mood, how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted his movement to go on. There were so many qualified disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur who, by external qualification, Sanskrit learning, time as sannyasi, time of initiation, who were supposedly more qualified than Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada perfectly captured the mood. The mood was preaching. The mood was expanding. The mood was bringing everyone under the umbrella of Krishna consciousness. And this is the greatest parallel that I see. I always admired that Srila Prabhupada sacrificed everything just to keep this Krishna consciousness movement going. He sacrificed his translations. He sacrificed his own life as far as traveling everywhere, trying to make everything right. He sacrificed his time to dedicate to his translations, so that the movement would go on. It was so important. And I see that Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he had that same mood. He is one devotee that I can say with all sureness that captured the mood of Srila Prabhupada. And what is that? What was that mood? Running this Krishna consciousness movement as under a GBC body. There have been so many challenges to that. Even one godbrother of Srila Prabhupada, who I knew very well, and I met him, and he was always very favorable. He called Srila Prabhupada Prabhupada. But at one point we were discussing with him, and he said, "But you must have a charya." And I always remembered a letter from Srila Prabhupada where he said, I think to his godbrother Bhagavat, "Yes, we should join together. But one point is, I do not agree that this one acharya." And Bhakti Charu Maharaj captured this mood of Srila Prabhupada, of a universal movement, a movement just like at the times of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when Shiksha was the main initiation, or the main focus on guru-disciple relationships. It was such a diverse society of different persons initiating so many different services, and devotees serving under one another. And this is something that Srila Prabhupada revived. And Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj kept that, that particular mood, and he captured this mood from Srila Prabhupada. And so many devotees, I can see so many devotees, their faith, even his godbrothers, took so much inspiration from his mood of wanting to do things exactly like Srila Prabhupada, always giving the full credit to the Guru Maharaj, not allowing his intelligence, which was very refined and very unique, but not allowing it to overpower the simple desire to obey every order and instruction of the spiritual master, and especially in how the movement should be organized. Otherwise, in the greater picture, so many of us can focus into different teachings of Srila Prabhupada, but he always focused on the big teaching, keeping the movement together, keeping the movement strong, and always willing to do anything and everything for any devotee. So that is something that impressed me more than anything else about Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj. The last thing I would like to mention, because I know that many devotees will mention many details, so I can remember I have already said this, that for years, I think maybe 5 or 6 years, one day I went to Bhakti Charu Maharaj's room, and I said, Maharaj, would you be kind enough to take me on a Mayapur parikrama or Navadvip parikrama, because I just can't go with these big groups. And he said, yes, why not? And then the next year we spoke about it. He said, well, maybe I'll have to take 50 or 100 devotees. I said, I don't care, Maharaj, I just want to go with you. He said, okay. And then the next year, always something would happen at the last moment. Then the next year, I mentioned it, and he said, no, let's go alone. And then the next year, which was the last time we were together in India, we were planning to go, everything was ready, and he got called into an emergency meeting in Mumbai. And the same day that we were supposed to go, we were going to do only a 2 or 3 day parikrama. And then when Maharaj came, he apologized profusely. You know, he was actually facilitating me, but he apologized profusely that I'm sorry about that. We will definitely go in November. You know? And of course, then the whole COVID thing broke out, and unfortunately, Maharaj left our presence, which left us all very sad and feeling a great vacuum in our GBC, in our movement, and in those devotees who sacrificed anything and everything to make Srila Prabhupada's movement stronger. And one of those foremost devotees is Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj. So I thank you again for this opportunity that I could speak something about him. That's what I feel was the most impressive feature of Maharaj. And I hope that his legacy and all of his disciples will do the same, take their Guru Maharaj's mission, and which was to serve Srila Prabhupada to the best ability, to serve this ISKCON movement, Srila Prabhupada's creation, to the best of their ability. And I'm sure that those devotees will be one of the greatest the greatest pillars of the future of ISKCON. Thank you all very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada, all glory to Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for sharing your wonderful memories with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. You mentioned that how he was so personal in his dealings, and he used to allow, or he invited you to stay with him, and you took the opportunity. You mentioned that how he was so intimately related with Srila Prabhupada, but at the same time so much humble and so much accommodating. He was always talking about Srila Prabhupada. And you draw a parallel between line of the mood of Srila Prabhupada and His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. that just like Srila Prabhupada captured the mood of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to preach Krishna consciousness, translate the books, cooperate with each other, serve together under one umbrella of GBC. So this was the mood which His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj captured from Srila Prabhupada. He always used to focus, he always used to repeat to work under GBC. He mentioned that how Srila Prabhupada, just like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur saw something very special in Srila Prabhupada and gave two initiations together. So Srila Prabhupada saw something very special in His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj also, and he gave two initiations together to him. And at last you mentioned that there are so many instructions that Srila Prabhupada would have given, but Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj always focused on the broader instruction of keeping movement together under GBC. And at last, you mentioned about that past time when he told you to take for this Navdip Mandal Parikrama, but he could not able, and he applies profusely for that. So thank you very much, Maharaj, for sharing your wonderful memories with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. Now we will be hearing from His Grace Gauranga Prabhu. So brief introduction about Gauranga Prabhu. Gauranga Prabhu is a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. He graduated from IIT Mumbai in 1993. His interest in Krishna consciousness dawned during his college days. He moved in as full-time preacher at ISKCON Chowpatty. Besides conducting Bhagavad Gita seminars in all prominent engineering colleges, medical colleges, and management institutes, he also counsels on stress management in several cooperative organizations for senior level managers, featuring on popular Atma serial and daily spiritual discourse on Star TV. He airs the timeless message of Gita to millions in India and UK. He is a Global Duty Officer for ISKCON Governing Body Commission, Trustee of ISKCON GBC College, member of GBC Organizational Development Committee and GBC Nominations Committee, Divisional Director of Devotee Care and Temple Development Systems and Administration Department of ISKCON Temples Worldwide. He is the Director of Govardhan Eco Village, which is a United Nations World Tourism Organization award-winning eco-village community, and co-president of ISKCON Chowpatty Temple. He is also serving as trustee and administrative director for Bhakti Vedanta Research Center, Kolkata. So we will be hearing His Grace Gauranga Prabhu, his memories with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj ki Jai. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj has been one of the most powerful leaders in the history of ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada recognized his glory right at the very beginning when he met him for the first time. And within a short span, Srila Prabhupada engaged Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj in some of the most responsible and intimate services. To find a guru is extraordinarily difficult. To serve a guru is even more difficult. But to serve and please the guru is the most difficult. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was so successful in pleasing Srila Prabhupada with his service attitude, with his devotional spirit, with his cultured heart and dealings, that Srila Prabhupada engaged him in translating the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, which was like the magnum opus devotional service of his divine grace Srila Prabhupada as part of his Bhakti Vedanta purports, to translate into a language which is Srila Prabhupada's mother tongue, Bengali. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj took this up as his mission, and as part of his offering to Srila Prabhupada on his centennial, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj completed the entire translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam into the Bengali language. In order to do this, he went through very austere schedules for many, many years with such regulation, with such conviction, with such devotion that it was practically impossible for anyone to imagine the depths of his conviction and love for Srila Prabhupada. In my own interactions with Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, I have found that my faith in Srila Prabhupada increased a lot because of Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj's conviction and faith in Srila Prabhupada. As part of his presentations in the GBC college, he would always share some very salient features about what he has learned from Srila Prabhupada. One of the first things he would always emphasize is how Srila Prabhupada emphasized unity in diversity. That ISKCON is a diverse society, attracting all different kinds of people from different walks of life, and we have to remain united in our efforts to serve each other and fulfill the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yes, differences of opinion are natural. In fact, differences of opinion are symptoms of individuality. And he would always quote how Srila Prabhupada gave everybody creative freedom, but at the same time, Srila Prabhupada gave us a higher vision to try to achieve. And so, in the midst of unlimited diversity within the family of ISKCON, we should try to keep this principle of unity and diversity uppermost. The second principle which Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj would always emphasize was that the GBC is the ultimate managing authority. So he would consider his service in the GBC to be a very, very important and intimate service to His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada as part of fulfilling his instructions. In fact, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had instructed the Gaudiya Math to form a GBC, and therefore Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj would always emphasize that no matter how many difficulties and challenges ISKCON may have faced in the first 50 plus years of its existence, but because we followed Srila Prabhupada's instruction of forming the GBC, although there were many ups and downs, although there were many deviations and challenges, still the society is growing from strength to strength in different parts of the world, and especially in India. And therefore, the third principle he would emphasize was that Srila Prabhupada emphasized the principle of group decision making. That yes, an individual can make a decision, but if we come together and try to run this society on the basis of a group consensus, then that would create an automatic check and balance in our overall decision making and governance process. So this is something also which I have always emphasized that difficulties and challenges. And in today's context, Srila Prabhupada may not be directly there with us in his physical presence, but in the form of his devotees, he's present. And therefore, Prabhupada expected the devotees to come together and work out their differences and somehow resolve these differences in such a way that decision making could be on the basis of the majority decision making. And the fourth principle he would always emphasize was that His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada has given us this mission on behalf of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Srila Prabhupada in 1966 established the institution of ISKCON to facilitate the growth of this mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of Name Ruchi, Vaishnav Seva and Jive Daya. We have been blessed by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada to be part of this institution of ISKCON so that we can spread the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu far and wide. So Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj had such deep dedication and devotion and concern about ISKCON's present and future. And he would always emphasize, whatever may happen, do not leave ISKCON. So I derive the greatest inspiration and insights from the life and the teachings of Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. And on this first year anniversary of his disappearance, I miss him very deeply. In fact, to be honest, I have not fully processed this loss because the circumstances in which his departure happened was such that we could not really come together and grieve his loss the way we would have liked if the pandemic was not there. I hope and pray that Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj continues to bestow his unlimited blessings upon me so that I can imbibe a fraction of his dedication and devotion to serve Srila Prabhupada
Do you
in this mission
this problem?
Maharaj ki jai.
Hare Krishna. So thank you very much, Gauranga, for sharing your wonderful memories and teachings from life of Zulin Bhakti Charu Swami. Guru Maharaj, you mentioned that how he was such a powerful leader in ISKCON. You mentioned that how to find a bona fide guru is difficult and getting an opportunity to serve is very difficult. And the most difficult is to please such a spiritual master. And His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj had this good fortune that he was able to please Srila Prabhupada with his devotional spirit and cultured heart. You mentioned that how he was so much how he was having so much conviction and dedication for Srila Prabhupada. For many years, he followed a very rigorous schedule for translating Srila Prabhupada books and offered them as an offering in the centennial of Srila Prabhupada in 1996. You mentioned your interactions with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj, and you mentioned that how he always focused unity in diversity, that always will be differences, but how we work together, that is important. He always used to focus GBC as the ultimate managing authority. And you mentioned that how this Srila Prabhupada has given us this moment on behalf of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we have to work together to please him. So thank you very much, Prabhu, for sharing your memories. Now we will be hearing from His Holiness Partha Sarathi Das Goswami Maharaj. Maharaj was born in England, 1952. Maharaj joined ISKCON in Bury Place, London, 1973. In 1974, he was invited to South Africa to help propagate the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Having been inspired by his spiritual master, Maharaj started the legendary tent campaign. Through the years, it has attracted thousands through kirtan, lectures, dramas, and sumptuous prasadam. Maharaj spent most of his time in South Africa, nurturing his many disciples, and traveled twice a year to Ukraine and India. We'll be hearing His Holiness Partha Goswami Maharaj, his memories with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj.
My dear senior godbrother, Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj, please accept my humble prostrate obeisances at your lotus feet. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to our divine Guru Parampara. It has been now 1 year since you left us, but your destination, which will be to associate with Srila Prabhupada in the eternal pastimes of the Lord, is far superior and more exalted than your previous situation. Of course, Prabhupada has said that the activities of the ISKCON mission are none different from the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But now you've taken birth either in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes or Lord Krishna's pastimes. But these pastimes will not be going on in the spiritual world of Goloka Vrindavan. They'll be going on within this material universe in Sambhamanda. We don't go directly to the spiritual world, as well you know. We take birth in the Lord's pastimes that are going on somewhere in this universe. So now you're associating with Prabhupada in your spiritual body, which is technically called Vasta Siddhi. And there you are serving Srila Prabhupada. I pray to you often and appreciate your loyalty and submission to Prabhupada's mission. I think Prabhupada told you never to get married and to always remain in the mission. And although when Prabhupada left and the 11 acharyas started influencing ISKCON, you had ample reason to leave. You remained within ISKCON. During those years from 1970 1988, you became the chairman of the GBC, and that's when you first came to South Africa. You have a very sweet nature, very accommodating, and always trying to encourage those around you. On a number of occasions, you assisted me and helped me in times of difficulty. And then you may remember I traveled with you and your disciples and Bhakta Rupa in a bus from Calcutta to Ramuna and then to Jagannath Puri. In Ramuna, we took bath together in the lake. And then I was with you in Jagannath Puri when you were taking your disciples around. You also used to insist that I would stay in your house in Calcutta. And in Mayapur, you always wanted me to stay in your room, which was at the top of the, I think, Conch building. And when I had to go to Mumbai, you wanted to pay for my aircraft ticket together with Sridharma Prabhu. You've always been very loving and very giving. And I considered you to be an eternal associate of Srila Prabhupada. Your contribution to Srila Prabhupada's preaching mission, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is incredible, is amazing, and your disciples and followers are very fortunate to be connected to Srila Prabhupada through you. So I encourage your disciples and followers to continue in your selfless mood of cooperation and make Srila Prabhupada's personal preaching mission stronger and more established, especially in South Africa. Of course, I'm more concerned about South Africa, but you have followers and disciples all over the world. Latua, Mauritius, Italy, England, Eugene, Australia. So on this occasion of your 1-year anniversary of your divine disappearance, I prostrate myself before you, and I pray that if I can please Srila Prabhupada even 1/1,000,000th to the extent that you have, I consider my life very successful. His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj Ki Jai. His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Our Guru Parampara Ki Jai. Gopremanandi Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for sharing your wonderful memories with as well as Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. You mentioned the loyalty and submission of Maharaj for Srila Prabhupada. You mentioned that how during the early years of ISKCON, when there was, after Srila Prabhupada departure, there was so much disturbance. He had many regions to leave, but he continued to serve Srila Prabhupada mission. You mentioned that how he was having such a sweet nature and he was always ready to help the people around him. You mentioned that how he was having such a special relationship with Srila Prabhupada. He was the eternal associate of Srila Prabhupada. And all the disciples, followers of as well as Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj are very fortunate to connect to Srila Prabhupada through him. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for sharing your memories with Maharaj. Now we would be having His Grace Radha Krishna Prabhu. Radha Krishna Prabhu is the GBC Secretary for Hungary, Romania, Turkey and Cyprus, as well as the co-GBC for Greece, North Macedonia and Israel. He has various international responsibilities such as GBC Nomination Committee. He has been the RGB Vice Chairman for last 8 years and he lectures at GBC College. Became the youngest person to receive a GBC appointment in last 40 years after graduating from GBC College in 2017. Radha Krishna Prabhu had previously served for a number of years as temple director in New Vrajdham or Krishna Valley, the Varnashram farm community of Hungarian Yatra, where he managed 5 departments with over 60 devotees. Radha Krishna Prabhu has joined ISKCON in 1994 as a disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Goswami, Bhakti Govind Swami Maharaj, having received first initiation in 1997 and second initiation in 2000. He was born in 77, where he grew up and studied software engineering and robotics. So we will be hearing His Grace Radha Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna. So we will be sharing, he will be sharing after a few time. Before that, we will hear His Grace Hari Shauri Prabhu. So Hari Shauri Prabhu was born in England on November 17, 1950. In May 1971, he emigrated to Australia, where he, on the second day of his arrival, he met the members of newly emerging Krishna conscious movement. He was duly accepted as an initiated disciple of His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada on April 9, 1972 in Sydney. In August 1975, he moved to newly opened ISKCON Krishna Balram Temple in Vrindavan, where he served as the temple commander. In November of the same year, he joined Srila Prabhupada personal entourage, remaining as his Divine Grace personal servant for 16 months. In March of 1977, Srila Prabhupada appointed him ISKCON's GVC for Australia, New Zealand, and Indonesia, a service he performed over 7 years. During that period, he oversaw the growth of ISKCON society in South Seas from 4 temples and ashrams to 17, including 4 farm communities, 2 schools, and several restaurants. He was also very instrumental in establishing branches of Bhaktivedanta Book Trust in Australia and Indonesia. In 1986, he began the work of transforming the diary he kept while traveling with Srila Prabhupada into a book, or rather a series of books. In 1990, he moved to America and worked as publisher for Back to Godhead magazine, the Krishna Conscious Movement Spiritual Periodical, for a year. He lives at ISKCON World Headquarters, Mayapur. He is currently the director of Bhaktivedanta Research Center in Kolkata as an academic resource of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and an archive library of ancient Vaishnava texts. We will be hearing Hari Sauri Prabhu, his remembrances with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj.
Patrovishcha Krivasanubhyevacha Patitanam Pamanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. So first of all, I'd like to apologize. My throat is not working very well due to some disease, so I hope that everybody can hear me okay. We're here to celebrate the first anniversary of Sripad Bhakti Charu Maharaj's disappearance, Tirubhav Titi. I use the word celebrate quite deliberately because normally ordinary people, somebody dies in the family, everybody's lamenting. But in our family of Vaishnavas, we celebrate coming and going. Same thing. Prabhupada used to say it all the time, that when you disappear from this place, you appear in another place and continue on with the movement of Lord Chaitanya. So there's nothing to be lamented in that respect. I need a drink. There's nothing to lament in that respect. There's no loss, or even if there is a loss, a sense of loss. Still we know that Bhakti Charu Maharaj has successfully completed his sojourn here in this earthly plane, and he's going to join Srila Prabhupada in wherever other place he's gone to. So life is a continuity. There's no actual appearance and disappearance. It's the same soul. It's passing from one place to another. And in the case of Vaishnavas, especially someone like Bhakti Charu Maharaj, there's no question of anything inauspicious. Everything is always glorious. We have our duty to Krishna to perform. We do that under all circumstances. And whatever association that we get, we value that for as long as it's available. And of course, for us, as Prabhupada said, the Vani and Vapu of the teachings and the physical form, the Vani is more important. So we observe these festivals so that we can invoke the remembrance of our Guru Maharaj. But we have also duties to perform, so we don't allow ourselves to be overwhelmed into inaction when our Guru passes from our sight. Actually, it's always there, but it's just that we don't have the eyes to see. It's nothing, Prabhupada said also that when Krishna comes into this universe, he only comes one time in a day of Brahma, and then he goes somewhere else. And that, it's like a transcendental roadshow, we used to call it, where the Lord and his devotees, they all go in a group, just like we read in the Puranas when Krishna's going to appear in this material world. Then ahead of him, all the demigods and great saints and sages, they all take their births in different places, so that when Krishna comes, he's immediately assisted by all these millions of great souls. When he winds up his activities, they move on and do the same again somewhere else. So we once asked Srila Prabhupada, is that the same with the devotees? When the Acharya leaves and goes somewhere else, does he have a group of devotees that go with him? And Prabhupada said yes. And he gave that example of Krishna. And you can also read in the Bhagavatam, just like with Shrutadev, I think it was, and Maharaj Baulasva. So they both wanted Krishna to come to their houses, but Krishna didn't have the time to go to both places. So he simultaneously manifested himself in both places at once. Not only that, all the great sages that were touring with him, they also appeared in both places at once. So this is the inconceivable nature, spiritual nature. So on the one hand, we're lamenting. On the other hand, we're part of Krishna's roadshow. So that way we have to see things in a very positive light. And whatever we can do to assist the Acharya in his mission, that's his mercy on us. Yeah. So, of course, we're very fortunate that we've had that opportunity to join with Srila Prabhupada and his close associates. Yeah, there's a nice story about Narottam Das Thakur that before he was born, all the great devotees had already gone. So when he was born, he was lamenting that, why wasn't I born, before, so I could meet Lord Chaitanya in person. But he was put there in his situation to continue on spreading the movement, even though he wasn't physically present. So we're also being put into that position. Yeah, we're told that the whole planet, eventually, everybody will become devotees. So it's already 500 years since Lord Chaitanya appeared and inaugurated this movement for Kali Yuga. But we haven't yet come to the point where everything, is connected and engaged in Krishna's service. So we have to do our best to do that. At the same time, when we're preaching Krishna consciousness, we're also purifying ourselves. We're not claiming any special privilege, or rather any special status. Privilege we have, but status, we don't deserve it. The status of these great devotees, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, all the way back to Lord Chaitanya. So that's just coming. In India, as we say, just now coming. So Bhakti Charu Maharaj, we can say, was definitely one of the parishad of Lord Chaitanya. I'm just thinking now. The first I heard of Bhakti Charu Maharaj, we were on tour with Srila Prabhupada. I think Jabhataka Maharaj had written a letter to Srila Prabhupada, and he mentioned in there that we have one new devotee, Bhakti Kishore, and he's a university graduate. So Jabhataka Maharaj at that time was just setting up the Bengali BBT. So immediately he engaged this boy, Kishore. And they say a boy, he was already older than most of us. I was 25 when I was traveling with Prabhupada. I think Bhakti Charu Maharaj must have been about 30 or something. Yeah. What is the... How old was he? How old would he be now? 17. Yeah, I think he was 5 or 6 years older than me. Anyway, so he was a little late coming, in ISKCON terms. When I joined the temple in Sydney in 1972, I was 21 years old. Our temple president was 19 years old. So things have changed quite a bit since then. But anyway, Bhakti Charu Maharaj was a little older than us, but the real outstanding feature of him was that he was a Pukka Vaishnav right from birth. Yeah, he had so many good qualities. For myself and many others in the West, we came from very rough, comparatively rough backgrounds. I was from a small iron and steel town in northern England. We had all the bad habits that you can imagine and not imagine. But Bhakti Charu Maharaj was already in the mode of goodness. Yeah, we could see that. I always felt encumbered by my Rajasic and Tamasic nature. Yeah, I was always looking for a fight. But Bhakti Charu Maharaj was very gentle, like a lotus. Yeah, and in his dealings, we can say that he never had anything bad to say about anybody else, and nobody ever had anything bad to say about him. Yeah, Prabhupada told me that one time about another sannyasi disciple, that this is his qualification. He may not be a good manager. This was Mahamsa in Hyderabad, but he never has anything bad to say about anybody else, and nobody has anything bad to say about him. So Bhakti Kishore, as he was at that time, was quite a novelty. Not many people like him with the qualities that he had. But Prabhupada recognized him immediately. We had been down to Bhubaneswar at the beginning of 1977. From there we came back up to Calcutta and we had a day at Panihati. Then we came to Mayapur around about 10th or 12th of January and 1977. So Prabhupada at that time was getting very sick. He was always sick, actually. He said that there's never been a time when I wasn't ill, at least from 1966 onwards. Before that time, he had maybe one operation, but he was always fit and healthy. As soon as he started the Krishna consciousness movement, ISKCON, he immediately started getting sick, and perpetually, practically, there was always something wrong. So by the time Prabhupada came to Mayapur in '77, he was really becoming afflicted. I think looking back at the illnesses that he had, I think the underlying problem that he had was with diabetes. Yeah, if you know anything about diabetes, it's a very horrible setup. Eventually all your organs pack up. And so Prabhupada was getting very, very weak. He had diabetes, his teeth were falling out, he had very high blood pressure, so many different problems with no digestion. So one morning I remember after breakfast I was waiting for Prabhupada. He'd gone to the bathroom after eating. I was on the balcony outside. Prabhupada came out, he came over to the railing and he was looking out across these fields. There's no buildings in that time. hardly. But he was looking across the fields, and he told me, he said, never in my life have I felt as weak as I do now. He said, still, he said, I've given you the framework, now it's for you to fill it in. So Prabhupada was very much aware of the seriousness of his illnesses. Of course, he'd been a pharmacist, so he knew about medicine and all the sometimes cheating that goes on with that. But he was very sick. So towards the end of the, and so in mid-February he came here to Mayapur, and that was where he met Bhakti Charu Maharaj for the first time. So immediately Prabhupada liked him. Very cultured, very eloquent, gentle person. It was just the ideal of what Prabhupada wanted in terms of a disciple. Very expert in whatever he did, and multilingual. So immediately Prabhupada engaged him in his book translation work. As it happened, by the end of February, Prabhupada got really super sick. He got a very high temperature, 106 as I remember. He attended the first day of the Mayapur Gauranga festival. About 600 or 700 devotees had come from all around the world. But Prabhupada was only able to attend the first day. And I remember when we were waiting, the GBC were all there, sannyasis were there. We were waiting outside Prabhupada's rooms for him to come out and come down and do the morning program. And I remember when they really recognized how ill he was, because they didn't spend that much time with him. They were out preaching, so when he did come, their eyes were, smeared with a salve of love. So they couldn't see what I could see, that Prabhupada was very seriously ill. But because Prabhupada himself didn't mention it, I didn't say anything. So we went down, had a short walk. No, maybe we had the walk upstairs. Anyway, we went down in time for greeting the deities, and then Prabhupada got on his Vyasa. He received his Guru Puja. Normally he would give a Bhagavatam class, but this particular morning he had, I think, Brahmananda or Jayatirtha, one of the leading GBCs, he had them speak, and he sat for 15 minutes, heard the talk, and then he got up to go back upstairs to see him. They wanted him to ring the bell as he circumambulated the deity room. On either side there was a big bell hanging, and when he stopped under the bell, he would ring it very vigorously, and the devotees would go wild. Everybody would be jumping in the air, and Prabhupada, did his duty. So he went round 3 times, and then he went back upstairs. But as soon as he got back up into his rooms, he went straight into his bedroom, which normally he never did, of course. And he lay down. He had this very high fever, and then he told me, now no one can come. No visitors whatsoever. And then immediately after that he said, call for Swarup Damodar. So despite all the problems that Prabhupada had, his mind was always on the preaching. So it was Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, as he became. He was the one person that Prabhupada called into his room. They discussed for half an hour about the science preaching. Prabhupada told him, you can have as much money as you like. You just tell me, Tamal Krishna will pay you. So like that. And then for 6 days, practically the whole festival, Prabhupada stayed in his rooms. He didn't come down. Sometimes he was lying on the floor. Sometimes he was on the bed. The whole schedule that he had was changed completely. And at one point, he seemed to turn the corner, as you might say. He started to improve a little bit. And up until that time, for the few months prior to that, Prabhupada's cook had been Palika Dasi. So she was in India. I sent for her actually because I couldn't cook. So we had to get somebody that could cook consistently nicely for Prabhupada and according to his diet. And you know, in Indian cooking, it's so wonderful that you can treat a disease just by eating. Yeah. So Palika had been cooking. I went to Prabhupada one afternoon, just after the Mayapur leg of the festival. I was at that time, I'd been with Prabhupada for nearly a year and a half. I was starting to feel a little strained, and I knew that previously various servants and secretaries had had problems from, you know, familiarity breeds contempt. After a certain period of time, you start treating Prabhupada as an ordinary person. So I didn't want to get into that mode. And I made a few simple errors in the execution of my duties, which led me to believe that I should, you know, now give up this service, let somebody fresh come in, and I'll go out preaching. So that was my idea. And so Bhakti Charu Maharaj, as soon as Prabhupada met him, he was introduced personally, as soon as Prabhupada met him, he immediately accepted him on his party. And one of the first things that he asked Maharaj to do was cook a meal. He felt he's a Bengali. His Prasad, or his cooking will be good for me. The problem was that Bhakti Charu Maharaj couldn't cook either. Anyway, somehow or another we had about 5 or 6 people on the party, but he learnt really fast. When he first served Prabhupada what he cooked, Prabhupada wasn't too happy about it, but he gave him some instructions, and after that, the next day, the prasadam was improving. So after 2 or 3 days, Prabhupada liked it very much. So that was I think, his first chance to do some personal service to Srila Prabhupada. So after the festival had finished, everybody went back to the various temples. Bhakti Charu Maharaj was added as a permanent member of Prabhupada's party, at least for some time. So myself, I left the party on March the 13th, 1977. I was asked by Srila Prabhupada, actually what first happened was that I went to Prabhupada and told him that I'm feeling a little jaded. I don't want to commit any offences. So as soon as I said that, Prabhupada said, yes, very good. That he was happy that I was aware enough of my own consciousness that I needed refreshing and I needed to avoid making any offences. So I left the party in mid-March here in Mayapur. I had to get a visa. Prabhupada sent me back to Australia. So I had to go to Delhi and get a new visa. Whilst I was there, then we heard that Prabhupada was coming to Bombay. Somehow or another, he had gotten some strength back, and he decided the devotees had arranged a big pandal in Bombay, and Prabhupada decided to attend it. So we picked him up at the airport. I think Bhakti Charu Maharaj was in the party at that time. And we drove to Juhu Beach, Bombay. And Prabhupada stayed there for some time. Bhakti Charu Maharaj remained there as his cook. Then, of course, they went to London, July, August. He went to spend his Vyasa Puja and Janmashtami in London. From there he intended to travel from England to America. He specifically wanted to introduce Varnashram Dharma, and so he had a plan to visit each of the big farming communities like Gitanagari, New Vrindavan, New Mayapur. So he wanted to visit each one of them, he said, and make them strong and have this Varnashram system. So they got to London, he got very sick again. He had to have an operation. So then he changed his mind and immediately went back to Mayapur. Not Mayapur, sorry, Bombay. And previously, I've actually skipped a couple of months. After the Mayapur Purnima festival, a few weeks after that, Prabhupada went to London, he came back. Yeah, he came back on September, mid-September. So in May, he had about a week in Rishikesh. And whilst he was there, first of all it was nice, but whilst he was there, then again this problem came physical. And Prabhupada called for his servants and secretaries. Bhakti Charu Maharaj was on the party. And he told them that I want to return immediately to Mayapur. I'm going to leave my body. So immediately the same day they packed everything up and they went back to Vrindavan. So whilst he was in just after he left Rishikesh, he made a will, last will and testament. And he called for all the GBCs to come. This was in late May. Some important things were decided there about initiations in the future, about printing of books, and what else? No, not at that time. But anyway, there were various things that had to be, set up. A lot of banking stuff had to be resolved. So whilst I was there, I got to Vrindavan a little late. All the GBCs had been called, but because I was a new GBC, I made a GBC in April. So May, I'd only been a GBC 2 or 3 weeks. So somehow or another, my name wasn't on the list. I found out from somebody else the GBCs all have to go to Vrindavan. So I jumped on the first plane. I got there May 29th. By that time Prabhupada had again had a little bit of an improvement. The GBCs had had their meetings. They all went back. So I stayed on for a few days in Vrindavan. So one thing that I wanted to do was to sign on to Srila Prabhupada's touring party as his GBC secretary. He had a system. When he first set up the GBC in 1970, Prabhupada said that now I'll have one secretary, and any GBC man can travel with me for 1 month to get trained up, to get some association, etc. So although I'd just been with Prabhupada for nearly a year and a half, I was eager to sign up for an extra month. So I made an arrangement with Tamal Krishna Maharaj that I would come at the end of September to be Prabhupada's visiting secretary for the month of October. So that was all set up. Also significantly, during that short week that I was with Prabhupada in May, actually May through June. So at the end of May I arrived. I thought I've spent so much money to come here, I should get some value for that. So I stayed, I think, about an extra 8 or 10 days. So that was during the period when Bhakti Charu Maharaj, became a sannyasi. Actually, at the festival, Prabhupada, Gopurnima festival, Prabhupada had given him initiation, Chirchara Gopinath. And then within, April, May, June, beginning of June, I forget the exact date, might have been the 2nd or something, 3rd. Huh? What was the date when he took sannyas? It was early June. It was the first week. Huh? I don't think in terms of... Anyway. Prabhupada decided to give him sannyas. So there were 2 other devotees. One was Chaitya Guru. He was a Punjabi. He was preaching in Chandigarh. And there was another sannyasi. Actually, he was a Mayavadi, Bhakti Prem. And he was going under the name of Prem. He was one of these guys with, frizzy hair, like a Yogananda style kind of long hairs thing, hippie. And he would wear this bright orange smock all the way down to his feet. So he had a PhD in Hindi, I think, or Sanskrit. So Prabhupada, when he first met him, he saw some potential there. He was a very gentle kind of person. And so he had started getting Prem to come to see him every morning. And he would have him sit down and translate like a block of text from one of his books. And gradually he trained him up how to translate, and at the same time make him a Vaishnava, because he was a full-on Mayavadi. But by translating Prabhupada's books, with Prabhupada sometimes sitting and watching him do it, he very quickly, picked up on the Vaishnava philosophy. So those 3 men, Prabhupada decided, they were all Indians, so that was an advantage Prabhupada had, or ascribed sometimes, that you've already got half of Krishna consciousness in the form of your culture, Jati Dharma. Yeah, so now give the proper philosophy, give some engagement in Krishna's service, and become a full-on Vaishnava. He did that quite a few times. Lokanath was another one. So these 3 Indian boys, or young men, Prabhupada decided should all be given sannyas. So I was there for that ceremony. I remember Bhavananda was there, so Prabhupada called him in, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he said, now this Prem is a little sentimental, so he said, I'm giving him sannyas, so you make sure that a very elaborate Yajna should be set up, should be nice, occasion, something that he won't forget. Yeah, that was the idea. He said, give him such a nice experience that he won't forget. So they were all given sannyas, because Chirchara Gopinath was given the name Bhakti Charu. Prem became Bhakti Prem Swami, and Chaitya Guru became Bhakti Chaitanya Swami. So that means that Bhakti Charu Maharaj got all his 3 initiations within about, what, 4 months or something. April, May, June. Less than 4 months. He immediately was made into a sannyasi. So Bhakti Prem, later on he left and went his own way. I think he found it difficult living with the predominantly Western temples at that Western occupied temples at that time. Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, he was made the North Indian GBC member, and Bhakti Charu Maharaj, of course, he had his service of translation work and preaching in Bengali, so he went back to Mayapur. So let's see then. I arrived you want me to finish? All right. Well, having made the arrangement that I could come back to Prabhupada's party for a month, I was now a new GBC. I booked in for the month of October 1977. So I arrived the last day of September, early in the morning. There was about 8 or 9 senior men there, some sannyasis, temple presidents. I got there early in the morning. In the evening, we were called into Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada asked each one of us individually, should he stay in Bombay and wait for the opening of the Juhu temple, which was still at least a few weeks away, or should I go back to Vrindavan? So everybody voted that he should go back to Vrindavan, except Gopal Krishna Maharaj. He was concerned that if Prabhupada leaves Bombay, everybody's going to leave Bombay to go to Vrindavan with him. But Prabhupada made it clear that it was for health, it was not for a preaching consideration. So that same evening that I arrived, September 29th, I flew to Delhi. The next morning I went with Bhagavata Shraya Prabhu, the Delhi temple president, to buy a big double bed, because Prabhupada's bedroom in Vrindavan is quite small. So we knew we'd need that whole area, darshan area. So I went and bought this double bed, put that in the front there, and various other things. Then we informed Tamal Krishna Maharaj that everything's ready, and so Prabhupada came on the train, and he arrived early the next morning, and of course that's where he spent his last 6 weeks. So one of the problems that we had was that, Prabhupada was literally skin and bone. We had at least 5 or 6 different doctors come in the following weeks, checking this, checking that, speculating, or it's just the blood pressure, or this, that and the other. But there was a difficulty for us in that we didn't speak Bengali or Hindi, and there weren't really that many competent Indian devotees around at that time. ISKCON was still quite young, and the temples were all being run by Westerners who also didn't know anything. So either Prabhupada or Tamal Krishna Maharaj suggested that Bhakti Charu Maharaj be called. He was still in Calcutta at that time, or Mayapur, doing his service. So Prabhupada specifically called for Bhakti Charu Maharaj to come and be with him. At that time we didn't know it was only going to be 6 weeks, but to be there to look after his medicines and do a little cooking and like that. So he did that. Prabhupada was very pleased with him, but at the same time it was an impossible task, of course. Sometimes Prabhupada would go the whole day without eating or drinking, Sometimes he had some pains from like bed sore, had to be rolled over every half hour. He was so weak that he couldn't even roll over in bed. He had to ask us to do that. Sometimes he sat up in his bed, we would scratch his back, and sometimes he would say, "Scratch, scratch." So he'd be scratching Prabhupada's back. You could see the lines in the skin from your fingernails, and Prabhupada would say, "Scratch," like this. So anyway, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he was a very important person, especially in that final pastime. I could see at least, and I'm sure many others did, we could see that he had been sent by Krishna to look after Prabhupada, and he did so very admirably. He had a real intimate relationship with Prabhupada in the sense that he was a young Bengali. He had automatically had all the best qualities of a devotee. So Prabhupada recognized that, and he was always very gentle with him. So, but again, because he was so new, then sometimes, things wouldn't be done properly or whatever. But Prabhupada was very affectionate towards him. He could see that he was a very special devotee. And so, of course, he stayed up until Prabhupada's disappearance on the 14th of November. I myself, at the end of the month of October, I had gone back to Australia. I had my 1 month as a visiting GBC. And then I asked Prabhupada whether I could stay again with him or not. He said, "Not right now." He said, "I'm more pleased with you. You're doing well over there, so you stay there in Australia. Later on we can see." So I left at the end of October, and of course then we got the news of Prabhupada's disappearance at the middle of November. So yeah, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, we can see, was a very fortunate soul, and anybody that follows him, or is associated with him, then they also become very fortunate. He was an ideal everything. Yeah, God, brother, servant, guru, cook, translator, singer. We never knew that he could sing. Beautiful. So anyway, that's his good fortune and our good fortune that we met, and we will meet again for sure. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Bhakti Charu Maharaj ki.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for such elaborate offering and your remembrance with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. You mentioned that how just like Krishna appeared with his associates, so Srila Prabhupada with his associates, and Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj is among them. He was a born Vaishnava, cultured and gentle person, which Srila Prabhupada was looking forward. And as soon as Srila Prabhupada found him, immediately he engaged in so many wonderful services, especially translating his books. He got shelter of Srila Prabhupada immediately, and within 4 months, sannyas. And at last, you mentioned that how just whosoever follow him is so fortunate. He was an idea. He is ideal everything. He is a guru, cook, translator. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for sharing. Now at last we will be hearing from His Grace Radha Krishna Prabhu. I already gave a brief introduction about him. Just last point to mention that he is the GBC Secretary for Hungary, Romania, Turkey, and Cyprus. And he became the youngest person to receive GBC appointments. So we will hear His Grace Radha Krishna Prabhu, his offerings, his remembrances with His own Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Dear Bhakti Charu Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj, although I did not have so much personal interaction with you, the little amount that I did have was always uplifting and encouraging. Being a younger second generation devotee, I always felt accepted and loved by you. And as a new leader and member of the GBC, I never felt from you that I was inferior in any way. I am remembering with great affection our meetings in Mayapur. You would often call His Holiness Shivaram Swami and my Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Bhaktibinoda Govinda Swami, over for lunch, and would always be so kind and caring to invite me as well. It was wonderful to witness your loving exchanges, not to mention respecting the most wonderful feasts you would personally arrange for us. Your loving smile and gestures would often remind me of my grandfather. I felt so much at home with you. I remember you as a person of action, a person who got things done. As a close friend of the Hungarian Yatra from the very early days, you were always available and reaching out to offer your kind help. Thank you so much for that. We are very thankful for your invaluable contribution to ISKCON and to the lives of the devotees around the world. Maharaj, you are sorely missed. Our only solace is knowing that you are by Srila Prabhupada's side, serving him in his mission, wherever that may be. We will meet again, and I look forward to that so much, to see your smiling face and hear your soothing words. Thank you for everything, Maharaj. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. Your servant, Radha Krishna Das.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Prabhu, for sharing your memories. Like you mentioned that how His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj was person in action. So thank you very much for reminding. So this is the end of today's remembrances by various senior God brothers of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj and senior leaders in ISKCON. So tomorrow we will be continuing the sessions. We will be hearing from senior devotees, their remembrance with Guru Maharaj. And tomorrow morning, we will be hearing from His Holiness Bhakti Vidya Purna Swami Maharaj. And in the evening, we'll have a series of remembrances by His Grace Amrish Prabhu, His Grace Anuttama Prabhu, His Grace Devakinandan Prabhu, His Holiness Shivaram Swami Maharaj, and His Grace Bodhayana Prabhu. So we will be meeting and we are celebrating this 7-day online Tirupha festival of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj. Thank you very much for joining. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj Tirupha Mahotsav Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari 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 Bol.